All right, so picture this. You're about to board a ship, ready to start a new job. Maybe you're even sailing to Colombia. It's exciting, right?
Sounds like an adventure.
It does. But let's be real. There's always that little voice whispering in the back of your head, what's the worst that could happen?
Oh, yeah, I know that voice.
Right. And usually we think pirates, storms, rogue waves.
All the high seas drama.
Exactly. But what if I told you today's deep dive is about a seaman whose story throws a huge curveball at those usual seafaring injury assumptions? And the culprit,
Don't tell me, Scurry.
worse, a slippery bathroom floor.
You're kidding.
Nope. Today's case centers around a seaman named Christopher Calera, and, well, his story really makes you think twice about where we draw the line between, like, a personal accident and a work-related injury.
That's the thing about maritime law, right? It's often the totally unexpected stuff that lands you in court.
Yeah.
Christopher Calera's case, it's not about storms or, any kind of high seas drama, but it brings up these really interesting questions.
It really does. Okay, so the basics. Christopher Calera, he was an ordinary seaman hired by Hoegh Fleet Services. He was all set to join the crew of the Hoegh Grace, that was the ship's name, on its way to Colombia.
Okay.
What does being an ordinary seaman even entail? Like, what do they actually do? Help paint the picture for us.
It's about as physically demanding as it gets on a ship, to be honest. Long hours, tough conditions, time away from your family and friends. So when an injury threatens that, well, the stakes are already pretty high, right?
Yeah, no kidding. So you've got Calera, he's all prepped, medically cleared for duty, ready to embark on this new adventure, and bam, he slips and falls in the bathroom
Ouch.
at the Holiday Inn, where his employer put him up.
Oh, wow. So not even on the ship yet.
Exactly. And that's where his case gets really interesting, because you wouldn't think a bathroom fall at a hotel would count as a work-related injury.
Right.
Right. So, okay, what happens immediately after the slip? What does Calera do?
Well, I mean, he does what anyone would do. He reports the injury, reports it to the ship's bosun, asks for some pain relief. Seems pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, totally.
But here's where it gets a little complicated. Instead of receiving, immediate medical attention, he was instructed to start working.
Oh, they told him to work after he reported an injury. What kind of work are we even talking about?
Yeah, and it wasn't exactly light duty either. We're talking carrying heavy luggage, cans of grease, that kind of thing.
Oh, man. Not ideal for a suspected back injury, or any injury, really.
You got that right. And no surprise, the pain got worse. It intensified to the point where Calera could barely get out of bed the next day.
I can only imagine.
So he's sent to a hospital in Colombia, and they diagnose him with mechanical lumbago, basically, severe lower back pain. But, and this is where it gets even more complicated, he was also later diagnosed with a perianal abscess.
Okay, so now we've got two medical issues. What happens next?
So they sent him back home to the Philippines for further treatment. And this is where the legal battle really kicks off, because you've got two very different medical opinions that come into play.
Oh, the classic he said, she said, or I guess in this case, doctor versus doctor.
Exactly.
All right, well, that's where we're going to pick things up in part two. So we've got Calera, he's back in the Philippines, refusing to sign that fit-to-work certificate. And, well, we all know what that means. Lawyer time.
It's getting serious.
It is. But where does a case like this even get heard? It's not like your average small claims court, right?
You're right. Maritime law, it has its own playing field, you could say. In Calera's case, his case first went before something called a panel of arbitrators. It's a specialized body that handles these types of disputes in the Philippines.
Makes sense. So what did they decide? Did they side with Calera or the company?
They actually ruled in Calera's favor.
No kidding.
Yeah, they awarded him permanent disability benefits based on his doctor's assessment.
Wow. Seems pretty clear-cut at that point, right?
You would think so, but there's a twist. They denied his claim under something called the CBA, the Collective Bargaining Agreement.
CBA, right. Remind me what that covers again.
So basically, it's a special agreement between a union, in this case, the Seamen's Union, and the employer. And the CBA, it often offers better benefits than just your standard contract. But
yeah,
it usually only applies to officers on the ship. Calera, he was an ordinary seaman, so...
So he wasn't covered by the CBA.
Exactly.
So he's getting something, but maybe not as much as he could have gotten if he was covered by the CBA.
Yeah, exactly.
So case closed.
Not quite. You know how it goes. The company wasn't too happy with that ruling.
Oh boy, here we go again.
So they appealed the decision. It went up to the Court of Appeals.
The legal system.
Yeah.
Always another level. So what happened at the Court of Appeals? Did they uphold the initial ruling?
This is where it gets really interesting. The Court of Appeals actually sided with the company.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they completely reversed the earlier
What
decision.
was their reasoning?
Their reasoning was that basically Calera's bathroom fall, it wasn't a true work accident because it happened off the ship, you see.
That makes sense.
And they didn't see it as directly related to his duties as a seaman.
So a win for the company. Calera must have been starting to lose hope at this point.
You might think so. But remember, this is a deep dive, and we're not at the bottom yet.
Ooh, I like where this is going.
There's another twist coming, and it all comes down to that document you mentioned earlier, the POEA-SEC.
Okay, right. The POEA-SEC, the Philippine Overseas Employment Administration Standard Employment Contract. That's basically like the rule book for these seafarer cases, right?
Exactly, the rule book.
Yeah.
And within that rule book, there are two things that are absolutely crucial for a claim to be valid. First, the injury, it has to be work-related.
Which, I mean, that's the million-dollar question in Calera's case, isn't it?
Exactly. Was that bathroom fall truly connected to his job? It's tricky.
Because it did happen before he even stepped foot on the ship. But then there's the whole issue of him making his injury worse because of the work they made him do on the ship.
You hit the nail on the head. That's the second crucial point, the POEA-SEC. It also states that the injury, it has to occur within the period of the employment contract.
Hold on. How can the contract time frame even be debated? It's a legal document. It has start and end dates, right?
It does. But, well, maritime law, it can get murky. Does the contract officially begin the moment a seaman boards the ship? Or does it start earlier when they begin traveling for the job? These little details, these are what maritime lawyers get paid to argue about.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this case went all the way to the top.
Yeah.
And speaking of, the Court of Appeals, they sided with the company, right? So how did this case end up in front of the Philippine Supreme Court?
Calera appealed their decision.
Wow. He didn't give up.
He did not. And that's where things took a very, very interesting turn.
All right, so Calera's case, it's made it all the way to the Philippine Supreme Court. Talk about high stakes.
This is it, the final round.
What happened? Give us the details.
Well, in a pretty remarkable turn of events, the Supreme Court overturned the Court of Appeals decision.
They sided with Calera.
They did.
Wow. Okay, so what was their reasoning? This had to have set a precedent, right?
It did. The Supreme Court, they focused on the fact that Calera's work on the ship, remember how he was made to carry those heavy items?
Right.
They determined that those tasks, even though the initial injury happened off the ship, those tasks likely made his condition even worse.
So they were saying that his actual work directly contributed to his worsened condition, even if the first injury was technically, off the clock.
Exactly. And it set an important precedent for maritime law. Even if the injury happens outside of work, if the work itself aggravates it, it can be considered work-related for compensation purposes.
That's huge. I mean, that has to be a game changer for other seafarers in similar situations.
It definitely has implications.
This whole case, it really highlights the complexities of maritime law, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's not always as simple as on the job versus off the job.
It really makes you think, where do you draw that line? Where does personal responsibility end and the employer's responsibility begin? It's a tough one.
It is, especially with these jobs like being a seaman, where there's already this inherent risk of injury involved.
Exactly.
This deep dive into Christopher Calera's case, what a journey. We started with a bathroom slip, and it turned into this whole thing, with conflicting medical opinions, legal battles, and then a Supreme Court decision.
It's a reminder that even these seemingly small incidents, they can have a huge ripple effect.
They really can. It also shows how important it is to, seek medical attention immediately when you're injured.
Yeah.
And to document everything.
Especially in these physically demanding jobs, documentation is key.
It really is. Well, this has certainly given me a lot to think about. Hopefully it's done the same for everyone listening. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and as always, keep diving deep.